Thank you, Darryl, for sitting with me. So can you give me a little overview of your career?
Yeah, of course. I'll try to be short. I was thinking about it. So I've been in the animation industry for about 16 years now. I started out on the east coast of Canada in Halifax at a very small kind of private college that was part of the big boom of 3D animation in the late 90s. And I guess my first gig was on a children's television show that was on CBC as an animator. It only ran for one season, so short-lived. But then I worked in television for the next like 5 years, I guess, on some sci-fi shows as a bit of a generalist. But I've always wanted to be an animator, character animator, or creature animator. So and then I moved to Montreal, and that was my first time working in games, video games, because video games was starting in Montreal quite a bit. Ubisoft had set itself up. But I worked for a studio which is now known as Behavior Interactive, and I worked there as an animator. I kind of went up the ranks. I started out as an animator and finished there as a lead animator on one of their projects, a Sony movie tie-in called Monster House. Then I did a short time, about a year or so, in VFX in Montreal here, working on some smaller projects and working on some IMAX dinosaur shows, which was kind of the big thing in Montreal at that time. And then I moved to Australia to go back to video games, worked for Pandemic Studios, which eventually was shut down by EA, and then came back to Montreal to work for Ubisoft as cinematics director on Far Cry 3. And I've been here kind of ever since. I did a short time at Warner Brothers as animation director, and now I'm at Eidos as the cinematics performance director in their cinematics department.
What was the biggest obstacle that you've had to overcome?
God, I'd have to think. I think probably the biggest one was when I moved to Montreal. So I had left Halifax and left television, and I was making my first jump into video games. And the company that I actually came up to Montreal for, we had decided that on a start date or when I should be in Montreal. So my wife was luckily able to get a transfer with her company, so we moved up. Got a place, moved all of our stuff up, and I talked with the studio, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to give you a start date very soon." So I waited a week, turned into 2 weeks, turned into 3 weeks, and I was like, "Okay, when is my start date?" And they're like, "Oh, don't worry about it." 3 weeks turned into 5 weeks, and then I found out that they were going through financial problems, and they weren't able to hire me. So I had moved my wife and I up. She had changed jobs, and here we're in a new city where, I'm from East Coast Canada. I didn't speak the language or anything, and I didn't have a job. So I basically decided, okay, well, I need to brush up my CV and my reel. So I worked for the next few weeks on very game-specific kind of animation tests, and I went and shopped my reel around town, and it was really no better way to describe it, but pounded the pavement. I tried to search and talk to as many connections as I could and find out what game studios were in the city, and I literally walked door to door, submitting my reel and asking for a job, and it went for a long time. I probably went about 4 months without a job. And I would say this was the moment where I began to think, oh my God, you've made a horrible decision. You're never going to get a job again. Maybe you're not talented enough. So all the self-doubt really starts to flood in. And I remember thinking oh my God, because I come from a culture that's very kind of blue collar, where it's, a lot of fishing, farming, or trades, right? You're your carpenter or your electrician. And for somebody to go into the arts, it's much more rare where I come from. So I began to think oh my God, you should have got a trade. You shouldn't have been an animator. You have no talent. Nobody wants you. And then I got a break with a company in Scotland. and they asked me to go over for a 10-month contract. So I was going to have to leave my wife here in a brand new city and move overseas. Until about 2 weeks before I was leaving, A2M called me and asked me in for an interview. I interviewed on the Friday. They asked me to start on the Monday. So
Perfect timing.
yeah, and I mean, I will say it was a low point because of the self-doubt. You really begin to think, oh man, like what have I done? I'm no good. Nobody wants me. So that was tough.
And on the opposite, what was your proudest moment?
I would say, something that was very positive for me was my time at Ubisoft on Far Cry. It was partly luck and a lot of enjoyment because when I went there, I was hired as a lead animator in the cinematics team, but I ended up being able to become cinematics director and animation director. And what I found was just through a luck of timing, they were working on some new technology, which was capturing full performance capture, which we had seen in Avatar and stuff like that James Cameron was working on stuff like this, but I had never seen it personally. So they were working on this technology within Ubisoft, and I had seen it, and I was very curious about it because up until that point on Far Cry, nobody had really talked about cinematics much. So I said, oh, well, this looks like a system that I think animators would love. So I tried to find out about it, and we did a first test, and it went fairly successful. And through a lot of hard work with a great team, we were able to kind of create a cinematics group there that I think produced some very, very powerful stuff for Far Cry 3. So in a way, I don't know if I wouldn't say it was a proud moment, but it was a very positive moment for me because it really kind of opened up inside me this passion for storytelling that I think was always probably there. But through this luck of timing with Ubisoft, and Ubisoft being so good at letting me explore that, of having that window, it kind of grew this part of me creatively that I didn't have a chance to explore before, and now luckily with Eidos I'm being able to explore it again, and that's the idea of working with actors and directing actors, as well as working with animators. But what I find is I'm able to now explore a different side of creativity that I wasn't able to before. So that was a very positive part of my career.
What are your duties when you're on set at the motion capture shoot?
Basically, I would say my overall main duty is to make sure we get everything shot, right? So now I always need people there to keep an eye on that, because I think like many creative people, I can go off track, right? If something happens and you feel inspired in the moment, you might want to like investigate that thread, which makes you less time conscious. So at the base is make sure we get our footage, right? Get it done. But other than that, I think my main job is to make sure not only that we get what we came here to shoot, but to also make sure that we get something that will entertain people. I think a big part of it is to make sure that I get the best out of the actors. And there's many different ways to do that. Like many actors are very comfortable in mocap, and many are not. Like that's probably the big thing right now is, although it's becoming more common to have performance capture, we're starting to attract actors that are used to, traditional actors that are used to television or film, right? So they're used to being in wardrobe, under lighting. But when they get into the performance capture stage and they've got this spandex suit on with these reflector balls, and it's a gray room and there's just a whole bunch of like red lights on them, you can see them kind of like, oh, okay, this is much different than I'm used to. So I think a big part of my job is to reassure them that they're still in a very creative space, and also try to, I guess, nurture their imagination, you know, because sometimes on a movie set, if you walk into it, you don't have to imagine what's there, but on a performance capture, you'll have hopefully a live feed of maybe the game if you're lucky, if you have that technology, but if not, you have to try to paint that picture and that environment with the actor to make sure that they're aware of where they are, right? And among other things, you know, I guess at the end of the day, I have to try to get the story moments across. Like at the end of the day, if we don't get the story beats in our scenes, then we failed, because that's in the end what we're doing even in games is we're trying to tell a story. So I'm responsible for making sure all of those story moments come through in the performance.
And did you learn those capabilities on the job?
I think a lot of it does come on the job, I would say, with the communication side of it. So communicating with an actor, I think you do learn it on the job, but I will say, coming through as an animator, a lot of the things that animators are thinking are the same things as actors are thinking. We're just removed a little bit, okay? The thing that I would say that I get very excited about when working with actors is their performance is real time. Okay, whereas an animator, we obsess and stress and think, and you know, we pore over the tiniest little details because we're building it from nothing. But for an actor, a lot of their approach is absorbing everything that they need, the background of the character, and they're just trying to, I think, get into the world, and then they kind of might not know exactly what's going to come out. They just hope that they've put themselves in that world deep enough that when they perform, it feels natural and believable, right? Whereas animators, we get the luxury of doing something and then critiquing it, and then saying, okay, maybe that's not good, doing it again, critiquing it, and that endless loop that we do until somebody says you have to let that shot go. Whereas an actor, they have a couple cracks at it and then it's gone. So, you know, it's a different, but I think to learn to communicate, we're still talking about roughly the same thing. So I think about performance, I think, in a similar way that an actor does, trying to get inside the character. Every time I do a shoot or every time I'm in a story meeting, I'm learning more and more about storytelling. So I would say that is something that you both learn on the job, and it's just time that you need to put into it. I mean, now with my role at Eidos, I'm much more involved in the story department, so seeing how to craft a story from ground up, not just execute a story with actors or animators, but to really see what does it take to craft a story from zero to a final product.
As an animator, as an artist, what's your approach toward motion capture?
It's weird because as an animator, when I was first starting to work with mocap, I probably, like most animators, I resented it a bit, right? Because it was taking away the craft of animating. But having used it for so long now, I mean, it's such a powerful tool to an animator to actually deconstruct motion. Well, imagine if you had reference that you can turn around 360 degrees, and not only that, but you can go into the F-curve editor and see, oh, this arm that's doing this is what the actual curves look like. It's amazing as a learning tool to be able to do that. So I think it's absolutely incredible as a learning tool for sure. But as an animator, I guess I've just come to the realization that it's not going to go anywhere, and it's going to be used in games, especially if you're in games. Motion capture is an everyday thing. So I can jump in the suit and prototype something very quickly and get it in way faster than I could if I had to hand key this. So, you know, from a director standpoint, I love motion capture and performance capture. You know, with the increased technical abilities in games now to have, you know, more robust facial rigs and more robust rigs in general for characters, we're starting to get to a point where we can do some quite subtle acting and capture it in a game. We are bridging the gap where if I shoot a scene and I see something very subtle happen on an actor's face, I have more confidence now that performance capture will get this. That being said, it gets you a certain amount of the way, but you need a very talented animator to bring that. Like I would say performance capture gives you 70% of that, but you need an animator who is really solid to pull out those subtleties.
Even after 16 years, you seem really to be passionate about your craft. How do you remain motivated?
Well, there's days when I'm not motivated. No.
Like everybody else.
Well, I mean, how do I remain motivated? I think it's because I still am able to remind myself that I'm doing something that I love, right? When I went to school, I had a lot of people where I grew up, because it's not, the arts are not the biggest thing there, said like, why are you going to go? Like, how are you going to get a job? And you're never going to be able to do anything. And I thought, no, you know, maybe not here, but I'll move someplace, and I'm sure there'll be a job. What I didn't realize is animation has opened the door to so many different avenues, right? Like I would, like the 21-year-old guy that took animation was happy if he would have been, at that time, an animator on Reboot, the series, which was big in the 90s, right? From Mainframe. If I was just a working animator, I would have been happy. If that guy would have thought that he was going to get the opportunity to be a cinematic director or a performance director and work with actors, right? I never thought, no, there's no way. So my wife actually used to say to me, you know, it must be nice having a job where you do something you love. And I said, oh, it is amazing. But I said, it's also really horrible when it doesn't go well. So I think like any other person in the creative field, if you love what you do, when you see it going wrong, you can be very passionate and very angry about that. So it's an emotional roller coaster. So the way I stay passionate, though, is there is a lot of areas that you can explore as an animator. Like if you're more technical minded, well, maybe you're going to go into a bit design and stuff like that, and you're going to work out how to design systems. If you're more of the art side, maybe, who knows, maybe you'll even find out that you're a good modeler and you might go and become, you know, a specialist in ZBrush or whatever. All of those things are there. You have to work with those people every day. You know, it's not just, oh, I get this and then I move on. Because games, you have to collaborate so much. You can go in so many different directions as an animator. So I think that's what kind of keeps my passion up, is I found now a new creative outlet, which is working with actors, and we're actually now working in the story department and crafting a story from ground up. And it's every so often it reinvigorates you. So it's finding those creative moments where you can express something that you didn't even know you were interested in. That's what probably keeps me going creatively. It's probably more finding creative people, really, if I boil down to it. Finding somebody who you gel with creatively. Yeah.
And as a group, create and push forward.
Oh, I mean, there's actually nothing like it. I mean, before I got into animation, I worked in a kitchen for a long time. And the dynamic of a kitchen staff is very similar in a way. People might look at me crazy when I think about this, but it's that feeling of being with people and all of you together working at some point, when you get that synergy of everybody working together. Like from a cooking standpoint, if we would get a rush and we'd be overwhelmed, right? But once that you work together and you trust the person next to you, it's a great feeling. And I find I get that, especially in games, I get it a lot, where you'll be in a room with somebody and they'll say something and that makes you think of something, and then oh, you can feel the energy building, and there's nothing like it. I mean, that brainstorming or that creativity is it's addictive.
Well, linking the work in the kitchen with animation is the perfect way to end this interview.
Is it?
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.